Hello everybody. In this video, we will try to understand a specific placement, that is Gemini ascendant in Ardra Nakshatra Pada 4, and in the ascendant we have two planets, Sun and Saturn, in conjunction in the Nakshatra Punarvasu in the Pada 2. So what it means totally? So when you see this for the first time, you can clearly understand the person or the native would have some kind of disturbed emotions or disturbed relationships or disturbed emotional attachments in the initial days due to his own mistakes basically, and later the native would rebuild himself or rebuild the system so that these emotions are corrected or these relationships are corrected. So you may ask me what made me to come to this kind of conclusion here. So basically here the Gemini rising in Ardra Nakshatra Pada 4 is indicating Pisces Navamsha. See, when it is rising, when the rising is in Ardra Nakshatra Pada 2-3, I would have imagined or I would have predicted the kind of destruction or the damage with respect to the native would be in some materialistic dimension, I would have thought. But it is in the Pada 4. Pada 4 indicates Pisces Navamsha. So Pisces Navamsha is about emotions. As here emotions are involved, because Pisces is a watery sign. As emotions are involved, I am also bringing up the relationships here. So the disturbed emotions and the disturbed relationships, and how much is the destruction here? So as it is Ardra Nakshatra, see, Ardra is nothing but a storm. It's ruled by Rahu. The deity is Rudra. Rudra is ensuring a kind of transformation. So transformation of the self is ensured, but later you can see here Sun and Saturn are present. Sun and Saturn are present in the ascendant, in the Punarvasu too. Punarvasu is famous for rebuilding the system, regaining the things. Even if you observe the life story of Lord Sri Rama, he initially lost the kingdom and again regained. Right? So Punarvasu is very much famous for regaining it or rebuilding it. And you may ask me, okay, you're saying it's related to Ardra 4, and Ardra 4 is related to the Navamsha Pisces, so involving emotions. So thereby you are coming to the conclusion of relationships here. So disturbed emotions, disturbed relationships, but how much is the damage here? Ardra 4, how much is the damage? Then I would think of the Jupiter placement in the horoscope, because see, the rising is in Ardra 4 in the Gemini ascendant. So I would say the disturbed emotions and the disturbed relationships can be because of the native speech and communication, because Gemini ascendant, right? And Ardra connection. Ardra is that storm or the destruction, and it is related to the emotions or the relationships because of the Pisces Navamsha. And how much is the disturbed emotions? How much is the amount of disturbed emotions here? That depends upon the Jupiter flavor here, Jupiterian flavor that is added. How much? is added. What is the dignity of Jupiter in the D1 chart, that is the Lagna chart, also in the Navamsha chart? That is very much important. That's one thing I would say, right? And another one is, you may ask me, the Sun and Saturn are present in the ascendant itself. So what is the impact? So Sun is nothing but, so rebuilding the system is confirmed here. Why? Sun and Saturn are in the Lagna itself, in the ascendant itself, in the nakshatra Punarvasu. So Punarvasu is famous for rebuilding the system. And how the person would rebuild the system? The person would have to rebuild the system, rebuild the emotions, or rebuilding that particular relationships and emotions by patience and dharma. Because Sun is the representation of dharma and Saturn is the representation of patience. So it is required. So the rebuilding can be related to emotions and relationships, and to some extent I would also bring career here, right? So because when you think of emotions and relationships, career also has some attachment related to it, so I would also bring career here. And here Ardra is the storm ruled by Rahu, and the deity is Rudra, the transformer, right? So it is the Pisces Navamsha, the Jupiterian flavor is added, but it is the softer side of Ardra. It's not Ardra 2-3, it's Ardra 4, right? So the intensity is a bit minimized, but still it's emotional disturbance. It's related to the relationships also. Now, how would I see this one? See, you just think of a forensic engineer who shows up after a cyclone, because already the cyclone is done. It's already occurred, right? So once the cyclone is, so the forensic engineer is showing up after a cyclone, and he first measures the damage, right? Because damage is present, Ardra is present here. And then the person would draw some kind of blueprints so that in future, at least he would rebuild. Now, I want to tell you, see, one thing is, just imagine somebody built a lot of houses, there's a storm and the houses are vanished. Now, the village people are now they understood that because of some storms, these houses are damaged. Now it is our responsibility to rebuild the system, rebuild the houses, so that even the future storms would not damage these houses. And another important thing I want to tell you, so the native would have this disturbed relationships and emotions, and is that rebuilding confirmed? Is it confirmed, or is there any way that the native can escape from this rebuilding the emotions and relationships? The answer is there is no escape. There is no possibility that the person would escape from rebuilding his emotions and relationships, because the Saturn is involved here. You're getting it? Saturn and Sun both are involved in the ascendant. So and in Punarvasu nakshatra. So rebuilding is confirmed and Saturn is present, so it is karmic. So the person took the birth. Actually, it's a very interesting placement that with respect to the first house itself, we get to know so many things about the person's life, because two planets are involved and also ascendant is involved here. So with the first house itself here, we can understand the life pattern of the person a bit more compared to other horoscopes, because in other horoscopes you would just see some ascendant rising and there is no planet present in the ascendant, and ascendant would have less importance because of the absence of the planets in other horoscopes. But this horoscope has two planets, two important planets, and also in the nakshatras that are clearly conveying a very important information, right? So definitely we need to, so with respect to ascendant, you can definitely say with Ardra 4, you can say that the person is a kind of, a forensic engineer showing up after a cyclone and measuring the damage. And then he draws blueprints. Then what happens after this? After this, Sun and Saturn are in the ascendant itself, but in the Punarvasu 2, which is the Taurus Navamsha. So it's very interesting that the Taurus Navamsha is including the Venusian flavor here, and the Ardra 4 is including the Jupiterian flavor because of the Pisces Navamsha, right? So now the restoration or the return of the light is confirmed because of the Punarvasu nakshatra ruled by Jupiter. Of course, the deity is Aditi, the mother of all the gods, and Aditi is the representation of abundance and renewal. And it is Punarvasu Pada 2, which is indicating Taurus Navamsha, the Venusian flavor is added. So some kind of steady and sensible rebuilding of the relationships and emotions, very much possible and also confirmed. But the person has to work on it, and he is going to work on it for sure, because Saturn is also present in this Punarvasu 2, right? So Sun and Saturn in Punarvasu 2. Based on this, we can understand, we can predict something like the person would try to rebuild his own identity more than once. More than once he would rebuild his identity, because the self-crafting energy, because Sun and Saturn are present in the ascendant itself, in the first house itself. So self-crafting can be seen here. See, Sun pushes for a kind of visibility and decisiveness also, right? So it's something like a person would be a bit serious, at the same time reliable, and quietly authoritative. Definitely. Because a Sun and Saturn, the conjunction, is making the person to appear very serious, reliable, and quietly authoritative as well. And now, of course, Sun is the third lord here, because for Gemini ascendant, the Leo is the third house. So Sun is the third house lord, which is the representation of courage, skills, siblings, and communication. And as it is sitting in the first house, the person would be a kind of bold communicator. And the person has to watch for ego in the speech, definitely, because Sun is sitting in the first house itself. So, and Saturn is the 9th, 8th and 9th lord, is sitting in the first house. Something like we're adding some kind of dharma and a kind of depth here. 9th is dharma and 8th house is a kind of depth. So transformation is also ensured one more time here because of the influence of that 8th house. Now, what else we can say about this particular person, right? So now, just imagine. I will try to explain in some simple terms. Something like the person is a kind of serious looking and responsible by nature, personality. So people see the particular native as a disciplined, calm, and reliable person. And the native often feels two opposite forces inside, one pushing to act quickly, that is the Sun influence, and the other is slowing things down, that is the Saturn influence. So this makes the native careful before making decisions as well. So the native often experiences delays in recognition, success, or relationships, but gains stability with time, that is also ensured. And the native rebuilds life and his own identity multiple times after setbacks in life, so becoming stronger each time. So this is the main theme of this particular whole thing, that is the native rebuilds life and identity multiple times after setbacks. That is the life pattern of this particular native, and he becomes stronger each time, I am telling. And the native is seen as reliable and trustworthy in personal and professional life as well. So the native speaks in a measured, thoughtful manner, and he generally avoids unnecessary words. And the native tends to be, you can say, focusing only on some kind of essentials. So the native's presence itself, the presence of the native itself commands some respect without loudness or show off. Because of that Sun and Saturn in the ascendant, that too in the Punarvasu. So the native may face, sometimes see, the native may face some self-doubt or inner conflict, but eventually I would say the native would make wise choices, right? And the native naturally values truth, ethics, and discipline as well. And one more important thing I can tell about the native is the seriousness and responsibility. That is very much ensured here. So by that, the native can try in law, auditing, analysis, or teaching, or any kind of leadership roles the native can try as a career. And governance is also good for the native. So the native often learns through hard lessons but turns struggles into wisdom. I will explain some important things later, right, in the video. The first thing is, this is also very much important for the native, that the native would learn through some hard lessons but turns his struggles into wisdom. That is the final theme of the native. That's the final life pattern of the native, right? So in essence, I can say the native becomes a calm, steady, and strong personality, respected for patience, wisdom, and endurance. So that is the most important thing that I can tell you. And here I would tell, it's something like the native would initially, in the initial days, the native may damage, I would say, his life. I would not say his life, I would rather say his relationships or his emotions through communication or through some kind of harsh behavior. The native might have disturbed relationships and emotions, but later he would definitely rebuild it, right? So why I'm telling it repeatedly? Because this is the life pattern, it's clearly shown. Because the Gemini Lagna influence, the Gemini ascendant, that is life path, is strongly tied to communication, speech, writing, and expression. And ascendant is in Ardra Nakshatra, fourth pada, kind of stormy words, sometimes harsh, cutting kind of, right? The words are a bit cutting or overly blunt in youth, maybe, when the native was in youth, right? And here Sun is the third lord here. He is also the lord of the communication. So in first, he is present in first. So strong self-expression, but ego can enter his speech. And Saturn is also in the first house. It's something like a restraint develops slowly. So early years may show some kind of miscommunication or misunderstandings or speech being taken harshly. And Punarvasu is making the magic as the restoration, renewal, and rebuilding. Whatever is damaged gets rebuilt better later in the life. So you can say in the early phase of life, the native may unintentionally hurt relationships or reputation through communication style. It's something like too direct or argumentative or misunderstood. Over time, with Saturn's maturity, the native learns discipline, patience, and a kind of measured speech. The native would learn over time. So finally, the native rebuilds life and reputation also through wise, calm, and valuable communication. So it's something like a river that first floods because of the Ardra storm, you can say, right? So you can imagine his life is like a river that first floods but later becomes a calm channel giving life to the land. That is Punarvasu's renewal here. So a journey from damaging speech to healing speech. That is the journey, in other words, you can say. And also, if you want me to explain in some simple words, something like a storm, and then some struggle, and then rebuilding, and finally wisdom. That's it. Life pattern in 4 simple words: storm, struggle, rebuilding, wisdom. Right? So imagine a young river as a native, as a child. Just imagine it. The young river is something like it rushes fast, floods fields, and damages crops because of the harsh communication, unstable identity, right? But later, with some Saturn's discipline, the river flows steadily. It no longer destroys, but waters the fields, supports villages, and becomes life-giving. It's a mature speech and respected presence. So by old age, the same river is worshipped as a sacred source of wisdom and survival. So the native as a wise elder, a respected guide, would be the native would be respected in later part of the life. It can be seen here. So based on this, so basically the ascendant is in Ardra 4. That is where this whole destruction things I am talking about, right? See, the Ardra's deity is Rudra, a fierce form of Shiva, the one who brings storms, destruction, and tears. And its symbolism is also a teardrop, right? A pain and turbulence, and also a kind of intensity is the representation that of the teardrop. And yes, Ardra can destroy, right? But it is not destruction for the sake of cruelty. It is destruction for renewal. That's why after Ardra you would see Punarvasu, right? It's like clearing a storm so the sky can shine again. And here Pada 4 is a bit sensitive. It's not completely like 2 and 3, a very harsh. But Pada 4 falls in Pisces Navamsha. It's ruled by Jupiter. So Pisces softens Ardra's raw destructiveness here. So it adds some kind of compassion, spirituality, and healing as well. So Ardra 4 natives are not just destroyers, they are rebuilders, healers after destruction, right? So basically some kind of disturbance and then rebuilding is the theme here. So when Ardra is rising in Lagna, generally we say the native's personality itself is like a storm. It's a strong curiosity, restlessness, and desire to question everything is present in the native. Sometimes intense, the questioning or the desire to question or the curiosity or the restlessness that you observe in the native is sometimes very intense or overwhelming for others. And it can bring sudden breaks in life path as well. So, but here, see, it is Ardra Pada 4. Pada 4 is Pisces. The native's final expression is softer, compassionate, and spiritual. So, and you may ask, you may say, as I am talking about Ardra, you may say, is the native a destructor? Right? You may think, but I'm telling you repeatedly, it's Ardra 4. It's not just Ardra. In early life, yes, indirectly, to some extent, you can say the native would be kind of destructor through some harsh words, mistakes, or intense energy. The native may destroy relationships, opportunities, or peace. But in later life, no, he is not at all a destructor, because Ardra teaches lessons through destruction. And then Punarvasu here, where his sun and Saturn is sitting, brings restoration. So the native is not a pure destructor, Rather, the native is like Shiva as Rudra, breaking illusions, falsehood, and weak foundations so that something truer and stronger can be built in the life. So I'm telling repeatedly that, it's not a pure destruction, it's a kind of rebuilding, I would say. It's just think of a cyclone. First it destroys weak houses, but after it passes, what happens? People rebuild with stronger foundations, safer designs. So over time the land is cleaner and renewed. So the native's life works in the same way, I want to tell. It's initial destruction, later renewal, and finally wisdom for others. So that is, in short, I would say the native is not a destructor but a transformer, I would say. So Ardra 4 especially ensures that destruction is followed by compassion and healing. So you know, you would you would you can clearly say that rebuilding with wisdom has to be said here, right? Instead of just saying destruction, I should definitely say it's rebuilding with wisdom, right? So the native would have, grown up very curious, asking endless questions, something like, initially how it starts, when this Ardra and Punarvasu, this kind of transformation is seen, then we can get a lot of interest in this kind of flow or the combination. Just imagine, in the childhood, a person is very curious, asking endless questions. Teachers admire the sharp mind but complain, too many questions, too much of arguing with this boy. So in school or college, the native often speaks bluntly. Friends sometimes feel hurt. Bosses feel challenged. So this is Ardra's stormy energy. So breaking illusions, speaking raw truth, even if it shakes people. So the native may lose early opportunities because of this harsh communication or stubbornness. So that's why I added not only emotions and relationships damage here, I also added opportunities damage. That's where a career opportunities would also come here, right? That's why I added the damage to career to some extent. Because see, the native may lose early opportunities because of his harsh communication, right? But relationships also suffer misunderstandings, right? That is the major thing here. So as the native is becoming a kind of young adult, the first destruction is something like the native enters his career. So ambition, here sun is also present in the horoscope in the first house. So ambition pushes forward, but Saturn delays progress. At one point, the native may lose a job also, a relationship, or an identity, right? So these three are the sufferers here: a job, relationship, identity, because of rash words or ego in communication. So it feels like life has collapsed, confidence is shaken. The native wonders, did I destroy my own chances, my own relationships, my own identity? So this is Ardra's destructive side showing strongly. And I would say how much the person would rebuild. It depends upon Punarvasu 2, Sun and Saturn in Punarvasu 2. And then it is falling in Taurus Navamsha. So definitely the dignity of Venus is very much important. If the dignity of Venus is very, very strong, then I would say the native would be successful in rebuilding all this, right? The relationships, the identity, the career, everything. He is able to rebuild. But the only thing is, Venus dignity is also important here. So as the native is coming into the middle life, that's where the rebuilding with wisdom starts, because Saturn matures in the middle life of a person. So the native learns the art of measured speech, talking less but with weight. Now people begin to respect the native's words because he's talking less but with weight. So in career, the native is chosen for serious responsible roles because he is talking less but with weight. So responsible roles would be given, maybe leading a project after a crisis, auditing systems after failure, or teaching others after mistakes. So in relationships, the native no longer argues to win, but listens and speaks calmly. Partnerships become more stable with this middle life, the middle age. So this is Punarvasu's rebuilding energy at work. What was destroyed earlier is rebuilt now, right? So, but this time stronger and wiser the person would be. And as you go on, let us say the person is reaching some 50 plus age, then by now the native has lived through many storms. Others come seeking advice to him, because if anybody knows about this person's life, then people would come to him and ask, like something like the person already survived after a failure. So the native would be asked how by others, how do I survive after failure? How did you handle the crisis in your life? And then you rebuild. How did you rebuild everything? So the native shares wisdom in 50 plus age is possible, sometimes as a mentor or teacher or elder figure. So people feel this person has scars but also strength. This person knows how to rebuild, right? That is the energy I am seeing in the first house. Other than this, I am not seeing anything. You're getting it? And how much he destructs depends upon Jupiter's dignity. How much he would rebuild depends upon Venusian dignity. So the native becomes a healer after destruction, like Shiva as Rudra. So who first shakes the world, then grants peace and wisdom. That is the fundamental energy. So you can see the person, the native starts with some destructive tendencies through speech or actions, but life transforms the native into a wise rebuilder, and he can also guide others after 50, the age 50, right? So even though the native is a kind of destructor in the initial days, but the destruction may not be too much because it's Ardra 4, the Jupiterian influence. At the same time, how much destruction is possible can be said by the Jupiter's dignity in the horoscope and the D1 and also Navamsha, and how much is going to rebuild can be said by the dignity of Venus, because Punarvasu 2 where this Sun and Saturn are sitting, and that belongs to the Taurus Navamsha. So Venus dignity is important. So with the help of Sun and Saturn, which are actually, Sun is related to the Dharma, because Sun is a king, and Saturn is related to patience. With this Dharma and patience, how much is going to rebuild, that is decided by Venus as well here, right? So that is the fundamental, that is the whole energy I'm seeing in the first house. Other than this, am I missing anything? If I try to feel it, I'm not missing anything. So rebuilding is certain here. Another thing is he has to rebuild. He is going to rebuild, right? And how much he would be successful depends upon the Venusian dignity, because rebuilding is certain. Because Punarvasu here, Taurus Navamsha here, Saturn is present. Saturn is karmic. So quality of that stability and rebuilding depends on the Venusian dignity for sure. So that's what I can say about this particular placement. Even if I say more and more, it's something like it's something like telling the same thing repeatedly in different words, kind of, right? So it's primarily, I would say, it's rebuilding himself. He would rebuild multiple times because Punarvasu is present. So Saturn definitely forces the inner correction for him, and Sun definitely renews identity through lessons from this emotional and relationship mistakes that he might have done. So once the self transforms, of course the outer system and everything naturally gets rebuilt, right? So that's a transformation. So that's what I see in this particular position. Thanks for watching this video.